Good morning and welcome to today's webinar on how to turn that idea into an innovative web application. Thank you for joining us. My name is Monique Wright and I'm the Expansion Manager here at ReInteractive. Today's webinar is presented by Errol Schmidt, our Sales Director. Errol, please take it away.
Thanks very much, Monique, for that nice introduction. And hi, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. Yes, as Monique said, our webinar today is about how to turn an idea that you have into a real-life application that we can show onto the internet, onto the web. And of course, that's never an easy process, but we've worked out a way to get from point A to point B that is a path that anyone really can take. So I'm going to show you how we get that done and how we can achieve that. I'm going to be as brief as I can, so I might not be able to cover every single thing that we have to do here. But at the end, I'm going to open up to a few questions. And then if there's still anything else that you would like to know, I'm very happy for you to reach out to me, or I can send you a copy of this slide deck that I'm about to show you, or we can do a one-on-one meeting. I'm happy to continue the conversation any way you like. So let's get into this. So what we're going to try to cover off today, there is a lot to get through here. First of all, who we are, who ReInteractive is as a company. Do you need a custom application? We're going to try to qualify that. Do you actually need that? We're going to cover off what is an MVP, a minimum viable product. Very briefly, that's a whole webinar in itself, but we'll have a brief look at that. The benefits of a custom application as opposed to something off the shelf. What that workshop process is that we've discussed. Using Heroku, which is the platform we prefer to build on top of, and I'll explain a little bit more about what Heroku is, but it's basically a server. We'll go through a couple of case studies. I won't have time to go through a lot of detail on that, but I'll explain a couple to you, what the cost of the process is if ReInteractive was to do that, and how to get started. All right, so first of all, who is ReInteractive? So ReInteractive, founded in 2010 as a software agency. So we design custom applications for people. So people come to us as, a company will come to us and say, I have an idea for an application. Can you build that for us? Or they have a current application. And so long as it fits with the type of programming skills that we have in our team, we get that done. Having been around since 2010, that's actually a long time in the IT industry. We've been around for a long time, and we're definitely known around the world for what we do. We're a Salesforce consulting partner and a Heroku partner as well. Heroku is part of the Salesforce team. Okay, so we're talking about this thing called the Application Innovation Workshop, which is really a path to get from an idea of your app to actually getting started to build on one. So the first thing that we need to look at is there actually a need for this? Is there actually a requirement for an application? Some of the questions that we like to ask to sort of qualify this in the first case are, is there an existing market leader that it would not make sense to go up against? So sometimes I'll get a client come to me and say, I want to build an Uber application, or I want to build a DoorDash application. The problem is these things have already been sold. They've been sold incredibly well by companies with an almost unlimited budget for their application and for their marketing. So to go up against them, you have to have something unique. You have to have a market that you can go into that hasn't yet been tapped, or you have to have some unique idea, a unique proposition that hasn't been done yet that is going to grab you your share of the market. So just something to think about there. If you're planning to then move ahead, so you've identified that market, you know that there is something required there. Do you have the resources to do it? Resources really are budget. Do you have the money to do it? And internally, do you have an organizational structure around what's going to be built? Do you have a team of people that will be able to service the needs of that application? As I said, are you offering something unique? Are there off-the-shelf products that already do what you want? This is actually a common one. So someone says, I want to build an application that does, sells T-shirts online. Okay, great. There's 1,001 applications that already do that. Some of them do it well, some of them do it poorly, and some of them might fit an exact need that you have. That doesn't mean that there isn't a requirement for some bespoke, customized e-commerce solution, but if there's something off the shelf that already does it, chances are that's going to be a cheaper way to do it. Do you have the budget required? And we're going to talk about how much it costs to build something like this in a moment. But that's an important question, because there's no point in starting on this journey if there's no budget available. There might be an opportunity to get investment money, and certainly the workshop that I'm going to talk to you about in a moment is a way to help get some of that investment money on board. And then the other one is, do you have a realistic idea of the time frame required? There's no point starting on this journey if you don't realize that to build an application like this might take 6 months, 9 months, 12 months to get to a real result that's actually something you can get into the market. So let's say we've looked through all of those questions, and the answer is yes on all of those. We've got all of those. So the next thing is to look at, okay, how do we get there? So what we've devised is a workshop process that innovates and develops an application idea. So remember, you've got this seed of an idea, and then provides a clear path to an MVP, which I'm going to define for you a little bit more clearly in a second, allows for further iteration, leveraging your existing tools and bringing in other third-party tools to help. So whatever you have existing, we're going to try to use, and we're going to try to get something to market that is the smallest thing possible. So the question is, what is an MVP? MVP is a minimum viable product, and it's defined as this. This is a very exact definition too. It's the smallest set of features that can be brought to the market that allow for a workable version of your application that can be used by your target market and provides a level of exchange with them, which usually means monetizing. So let's break that down a little bit, because it's very, very important. So it's the smallest set of features. Now, quite often in a workshop like I'm about to describe to you, you'll come up with all sorts of incredible ideas, and that's okay. They should all be on the table. They should all be considered. And then what you have to do is, at some point, you've got to start crossing out things. You've got to say, okay, that's not necessary day one. That's not necessary day one. That's not necessary. And you get the smallest set of features possible. And that might mean there's an entire back end, an entire dashboard that's missing. That might mean that the blog feature that you thought was really important at the start, well, maybe we can do that a little bit later. You start to work out what can be put into phase 2 and phase 3 and phase 4. There's no reason those phases can't happen quickly, but the idea is get something to market. Let's get this thing starting to make money, or whatever it's supposed to do, as fast as possible. So what we try to do in this workshop that I'm going over today is it's a 2 to 3 week process. And in this process, we work out the overall architecture. That is, how do all the parts fit together? What are the third-party applications that we're going to put in? Like maybe it's Salesforce, maybe it's a WordPress blog, maybe it's Xero integration, maybe it's Stripe to collect credit card information. All of these various parts that we want to put together. So we architect them all out, work out what is the server infrastructure that we want. In this case, I'm talking to you about using Heroku, but you might have another preferred option to use for that. We then work out a complete clickable UX. UX is the user experience. Where do all the pieces of the puzzle on this web page or this application that we're going to build for you, how do they all fit together? Where do all these pieces sit? And we're going to make sure that it's done in the best way possible for your target audience. What is going to make the most sense to them? What's going to make it as easy as possible for them to use? What's going to make it so that they want to keep coming back to your application to use time and time again? So all of that is very carefully worked out. It's surveyed within your team. All of your stakeholders are going to look at this thing, and we're going to come out with something which is going to be very highly usable at the end. It may not be perfect, because we can always iterate to perfect it later, but it's going to be the very best that we can work out. We're going to work out the full scope of the development and an estimate. That is, how many dollars is it going to cost? Before we go on, it's very important to look at what are the advantages of a custom application. I gave you those qualifying questions at the start to make you go, do I really need a custom application, or is there something off the shelf, or is this not something I should be doing? But there are a lot of plus sides to a custom application. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive. Yes, it's going to take a little bit longer to build, but here's some really important things. When you build something that you've designed and had your own developers build, it's completely 100% owned by you. The IP is fully owned by you. It's now an asset of your business. It's something that can be sold with your business. And if it's done right, it's worth an incredible amount of money. I mean, I won't go into some of the prices that people have paid to acquire some things in the past, but I think you've probably read some of the stories and you understand how much these things can be worth where they're done well, and there's a real need for them in the market. So you've now built an asset for the business. In fact, if you've done this right, you turned your business into a majorly technical business. You now have tech at your core of your business. And so that asset, that piece of software, actually becomes an important part of the business. It actually becomes almost the major part of your business. It's the thing that holds it all together and produces the result for your customers or for your clients. It allows you to continue to innovate rapidly. You don't have to wait for someone else's pipeline or roadmap to do your iteration. You can do the iteration yourself. You have an idea, you've surveyed it, you see there's a need, contact your developer, get it into production. And we do that with our clients all the time. They have some feature they want to build once they've already built the main application. They want to build a new feature because a bunch of their clients have said they need it. They contact us, we write an invoice, we get the developer onto it. A month or so later, it's built, and it's exactly what they want. You can then provide what your clients need without any compromise. There's no, well, we couldn't quite do this, or the team didn't let us do that. It's all yours. Everything is under your control. The costs are under your control as well. If you don't have the budget to build new features, you don't have to build them that month. You can not pay for more costs. Usually, if it's an off-the-shelf product, you're paying the month-to-month cost, which is okay, and it's a good idea for those sorts of products. But if it's your own, you can pause development for a short period of time. You can also then, at a further point in the future, bring an entire workforce in-house to do development, which can work out a lot cheaper and is better control for you. So these are some of the good reasons. And of course, I'm majorly talking about a web application, but all of these also apply to a native mobile application as well, which means, something that you look at on your iPhone, which is part of the same application process. We're also going to be talking about a couple of tools called Heroku and Heroku Connect. I won't go into a lot of detail right at the front here, but these are tools which connect directly to Salesforce. So if you're using Salesforce, Heroku Connect is an incredibly useful tool. And many people do use Salesforce, so it's a great way to leverage and surface data from your Salesforce instance. So let's move on. This is the workshop itself, and there's a very, very exact timeline. So although every client that I come in contact with is very different and what they require is very different, the application that they want to build is custom and it's original to them, the actual process of the workshop is very exact. And there's a number of steps you can see here, 6 steps, and each of them have a very exact outcome. So there's an exact thing that's going to happen at each step. I'm going to run through these steps really fast because I don't want to spend a lot of time on them. This is something that I can speak to anybody individually on. But the first step is a discovery meeting where we understand everything. We do that qualify step that I spoke about. I try to get as much as possible of an understanding of what the current business is, what things they're running into with the current tool set, and what that planned rollout is. What's the idea that we want to create here? We look at some of the examples of workshops that are done in the past to make sure that the workshop process is right for them. It's not going to be perfect for everybody, and that's okay. We have a look at some of the third-party tools that can be used, such as Salesforce, such as Stripe, such as Xero. We look at who the stakeholders are going to be. We want someone who's going to own the development itself within the company. That's a product owner. And we want people who are stakeholders to have their input as well. It might be a managing director, it could be a CEO, could be a board of directors, could be a potential set of clients that are trusted that we can introduce to. So that's the first meeting. We then go on to the project consultation. So let's say this is all discussed and signed off. We then go on to the consultation. So this is a process that goes on throughout the entire workshop, which is about a 2 to 3 week period, could be a little bit longer. And what we do is we're constantly discussing what are the needs. We're refining the requirements. We're understanding the absolutely essential features and the nice to have features and trying to separate those out so that we come up with a good list of both. We can have this future list and we can have the current list, and there might be a bit of swapping in between the two. But the idea is at the end of the process, we've sort of come out with a definable minimum viable product in later phases. So that's an ongoing project. We're architecting the thing. We're looking at the third-party pieces of software. We're having a look at the personas of the people who are going to use it so we understand what the best UX is going to be. While that's going on, step 3 is being done, which starts with the UX research and consultation, a very exhaustive list of questions. I think there's about 200 questions that we ask to really understand, how your user's going to use this. What do they want to get out of it? We then devise from that what's called a clickable wireframe. So this is just a black and white or a gray and white wireframes of the application. I can show you some examples of this in a moment. and it's clickable. So it'll show you from page to page, not the full experience, but just enough so that your stakeholders can see how the application is going to work, so that an potential investor can understand, oh, this is what it's going to do. This is what it's going to show me. There's no logic behind it. It's just a clickable set. You can also work out from there the paths that people are going to use. And quite often our UX designer will watch people clicking through the prototype to understand where they might go wrong or what might happen, so that he can build additional steps in there or remove steps if they become unnecessary. So come up with a best practice user interface. We then add to that a visual design element. So visual design includes the icon set, the fonts, the colors, the designs of the main screen. So we're not going to design every single screen, but the main screen, so we have a template. This will be used by the developer later on to start building out the actual process itself. It includes all of the branding of the business, which at this time can be defined if it's not already, but if there's an existing branding guideline from a marketing team, then we'll apply that to it. We then come out with an exact project blueprint, that we call a software requirement specification. So this is an exhaustive description of what's going to happen in the application. All of this documentation is extremely important to the stakeholders, that is your company, and of course to anybody who's going to invest, and then finally to the team who's going to do the development at the end of the day. And although you can't see it because my face is in the way, the last step there is to say that the client is encouraged to discuss every single part, so we don't try to rush any part of this process. Whilst I said it takes 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes it takes a lot longer because the stakeholders want to, you want to review things, you want to sleep on it, have a look at something, go to bed, come back to it the next day, make sure everybody in the team is happy with it. Now, sometimes you'll get differing opinions, and that's okay. They should absolutely be discussed, as long as there's one person at the end of the day, it might be a managing director or a chief information officer or somebody like that can sign off on it, that can say, yep, this is the final thing, this is what we want. And once we've got to that step, we can discuss the other things that need to go along with this, how we're going to get the server licensed. In this case, we're talking about Heroku. Heroku is a server layer that we like to use because it works extremely well for these sorts of applications. So we make sure that gets properly licensed. We make sure any third-party elements are properly licensed. That is, you've got Stripe licensed, you've got any particular plugins that you think might be important to the application. All of that is done so that we make sure all the parts can come together. We then do a development estimate. So we take all of those designs that have been done. We do a line-by-line scope of the minimum viable product, and sometimes with the later phases too. We list out everything that's going to be required, how many days of development each element is going to take, and any considerations about that, anything that we might not know and have to be discovered, or any interaction with another consultancy or another firm that might need to come into play on it. So all of that is written up, and then from that we can give you a complete estimate, how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost you. And of course, that's different for every application, because I know the number one question is how much is it going to cost and how long is it going to take? I understand, but it is different for everybody. So we'll know that at the end of the workshop process. At that point, the workshop is for all intents and purposes complete. And based on all of that, we can go, okay, do you want to start on the process? Now, whilst ReInteractive run this workshop, and we do it incredibly successfully, we've got workshops going continuously all of the time. It's a really, really good process because it really drills down on what exactly it is that people want. And what we get from this then is a client that can either say, okay, yes, I'm happy for ReInteractive to go ahead with the work, sign off on it, start the development, or you might want to get it done in-house. So you might want to employ your own developers, get them to start work on it, or you might want to go to a completely different agency and get them to do the work, all of which is okay. We like to just make it as open as possible and as easy as possible to do this sort of thing. So that's the workshop. I know I ran through that incredibly fast, but I just wanted to give you the bare bones of it. What is the outline of it? Just a very quick word on what Heroku is, because I've mentioned it a couple of times. Heroku is what we call a managed infrastructure platform. Sits on top of AWS, which is probably the world's foremost hosting service for web applications. So it sits on top of that, and it manages a bunch of the services. So it helps us with things like scaling really easily, make sure all of the resources that you need to do all of the various parts, like the database and the computing parts and all of that, are all there. One of the great aspects of this is we can use a tool called Heroku Connect, which is a thing that sits alongside of it and connects through to Salesforce. So if you're using Salesforce or intending to use Salesforce in the future, it can pull the nominated information out of Salesforce to put into your web application. So that might be membership information, it might be people's addresses, it could be a product list, it could be articles, it could be anything that you have in Salesforce. You can surface onto the website, and the other way around. It's a much cheaper way of doing it than using an API call, and it's faster and very, very secure. Enterprise class, of course. There's a couple of examples. I've included these as links here because I'm happy to send this deck out to anybody that wants to see it, but I might just show you what this looks like. I know this is tiny, I know this is impossible to see, but this is just a real fast example of a particular client who got a workshop done. I've de-identified some of it, so you can't necessarily see all the branding and everything, but I wanted you to see just how much work goes into this. And it is an incredible amount. So you can see here, for example, the user journeys. This will take just a second to load. You can see the user journeys. This is a very complex thing, so we can see the map of how everybody moves through this process. You can see some of the wireframes. It's tiny, I know that. And you can see some of the visual design that's been done to make this look like a real, in this case, native web application. This is just part of it. This is a real simple pass, just so everybody in the team can see, well, this is what it's going to look like. So I just wanted to show you that, just because it's important to see some real live examples of this. And I can show you many, many more examples, of course, and drill into some types of things that we've done. We've done a lot in the property and finance. We've done a lot of commercial businesses, builders, that sort of thing, not-for-profits and charity. And whilst I haven't shown it here, probably the number one use case is memberships and membership-type organisations, various clubs, things like that, because it's really important for them to keep their members well connected. And using Salesforce, which is the primary tool amongst membership-type organisations, is to be able to pull the information out of there and to validate people as users based on, well, they're already in Salesforce. You can allow them to do purchases and things like that. They can see information about their account and stuff like that, which is really, really helpful. Last thing I'm going to show you here really fast, how much does it cost to do the workshop? As I said, it's a 2 to 3 week workshop. That is a very nominal number of weeks. It's a flat rate for a smaller application of 2 to 3 weeks of 9,950. This is Australian dollars. So 9,950. And then if it's a larger application, that is, someone who's thinking a little bit bigger, 3 to 4 weeks, think in terms of that, and 14,950. It's an incredible value thing. I know I'm sounding like a salesman here, which is probably what I am, but we try to get as much value out of this as possible. Whilst it says 2 to 3 weeks, you can actually take as long as you like. And some clients have spent more in the realm of 2 to 3 months getting this done. It's for the same cost. Our developer or our development team doesn't need to stay on it the whole time. An enterprise might want to look at something a little bit longer and a little bit more extensive, and we can discuss pricing for that. And as I said, what you're going to get at the end of that is the iterative design process, a clickable prototype, a high fidelity design, complete feature list, feature priorities, and a development estimate that can then be started on work. That sort of covers the major thing. Timelines, if someone wanted to go ahead with this, we really can start them. We've got a team going on this all the time, so we can really start on a 1 to 2 week notice at any given time. So it's really easy for us to start on this at any given time. That's the end of what I have to say. What I want to do now is just, have a look at, well, any questions? Is there anything that anybody wants to ask or anything that I can show you more of? More than happy to answer any questions. We'll stay on for just a few minutes to just see if, if there's anything anybody wants to talk about. I've got a question from somebody here. I'm just going to bring this up on the screen. This is a question, can you tell us more about Heroku and how that works with Salesforce? I covered a little bit of it, and there is a little bit to go over on this, but essentially we've got Heroku, which is where your application sits. You've got Salesforce, which is all of your CRM data, and then we've got this tool in between called Heroku Connect. Heroku Connect syncs up information in your Salesforce org with information in your web application and vice versa. So it pushes information between the two. You nominate which information, so don't have to be worried about, personal information or the wrong information being synced into your web application, of course. But it could be things like a name and an address or a login information or products or purchases or all of that sort of stuff we can surface then. So anything that happens in your web application, we can then have a look at the end. Hopefully that answers that question. I've got another question here from Ankit. So can Heroku be used to make mobile applications? The answer is absolutely yes. So we still, so the way that we do this is we've got your Salesforce information over here, Heroku Connect. We've got a web application that sits in Heroku, which is built with all of the logic and everything that is needed. All of the number crunching and all of the data crunching is done here, and then that pushes into a native mobile application. So the native mobile application is using the Heroku information, but that is just a standard mobile app that anyone can look at, and there's thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of mobile apps built in exactly that way. Does that answer your question, Ankit? Are there any other questions? Anything else? Great, you're welcome. Any other questions that I can answer? Anything else you want to look at on this? As I said, every individual is different on this. Every workshop process is different. The ideas that you have that need to be brought to life as a web application or a mobile application are going to be different for everybody. So I think it's important to go, okay, have that personal conversation. Contact me. You've got, I think, my email address, or I'll send it out to you. Contact me and let's have a personal conversation. Let's discuss what are your needs, and let's see if this is the right tool for you. Let's see if it's the appropriate thing that can be used for you. I won't try to sell something to anybody that isn't necessary or that I think is the wrong use for them. I want to make sure it's exactly the right thing. So just contact me and say, is this right for me? Let's have a look at it. I'm always happy to have a lengthy discussion on it. Let's dive into it. Let's pull it apart. All right, are there any final questions before we end off for today? If there's any particular part of this that you'd like me to drill in on in future webinars, more than happy to do that. So again, feel free to drop me a line. You can send me an email. Just one final question before we end off here from Monique, which is, do you have to be a Salesforce user to use Heroku? Excellent question. The answer is, of course, no. I discuss it a lot because a lot of enterprise customers already use Salesforce, and it's a great way to pull out information and use it on the web. But no, it's absolutely not required at all. We've got many customers who use Heroku that don't use Salesforce. Heroku is still a really great platform to use because it allows for a lot of things that are automated in the background, like service scaling, which is really important when you've got a web app that's just building and building over time. You've got sharp spikes in use because of marketing that goes on and things like that. And Heroku just rolls with those really easily. It's also a really stable platform, high uptime. It's quite secure as well. For added safety, if you want to, we can locate it in an Australian data center if that's a requirement for your business. Otherwise, latency is really low anyway, so it's a good application to use. Another question here. Do we need app users to have Salesforce user licenses? No. Salesforce licenses will be within the business itself. The end user does not have to have a Salesforce licensing of any kind. What you'll do is you'll license Heroku, and that'll expose any information that we want to expose to your end users. So no, it's not like, say, a communities license in Salesforce, if you're aware of what that is. That requires licensing every time, but otherwise, no. Great, you're welcome, Ankit. All right, I think that's all the questions for today. Great to be able to speak to everybody today. I realise this is a difficult thing to ask questions and stuff like that, so feel free to get on to me anytime you like. Otherwise, it was really nice talking to everyone. So thank you all for listening to the webinar today. Goodbye.